Okay. So, yes, that is why, again, that would be why I would not do, okay, I think I'm good now. Okay. Again, that would be why I do not have any expectations and why you want to do this without an agenda, because anything could possibly happen, right? As I was saying about 15 minutes before I lost signal. In any case, I am going to finish the continuation. I'm almost done, but I wasn't done enough before that I actually, that just getting randomly booted on the internet here was a bit strange. Sometimes that happens when I'm delving into Wi-Fi connection. But in any case, and I also have a lot of equipment that is signed into this too. So there's a lot going on here. It was the first time that it had happened. If you had not subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do so at SL Models and Talent Agency LLC. If you want to become a community member, you can do so for starting out at just $5 a month at patreon.com/SLMTA. So where I left off at was simply this, that there are different layers of soulmates that, and what I was doing is I was explaining to you about the parallelism and alignments, and I was about to give you an actual analogy on what an alignment is, which would be using a vehicle for that matter. So when you're driving and you know that your vehicle needs an alignment, it usually is when your car is taking you, like you know when you're going straight, but your car is going to start taking you into another direction. Okay, that is where you need an alignment. Something is wrong with the tires, something's wrong with the whether it's the rear or the front or whatever the case may be. Okay. And then once it is aligned, then you're able to continue straight down your path. Okay. Well, we gotten that piece straightened out. Well, the way that you actually know about whether or not, excuse me, whether or not your soulmate is actually the one that you would marry is if they were equally aligned. Equally aligned means that everything naturally is happening together with you, not your perception that they are with you, but that they are actually with you. Now, what's the difference between thinking that somebody is with you, the perception, should I say, and actually having an equal alignment? It is when you have to start doing more to make the relationship work, or you may actually see that it becomes one-sided. But some of us end up becoming insecure in ourselves. And so out of desperation, we try to act as if that relationship is not being forced until you start feeling heavy that, oh, I'm stuck. I can't do this. I can't do that. And now I have to continue to do this. I can't do that, et cetera, et cetera. So at this point, if that is where you are, if you're even thinking in that concept, then it is something that you may have to accept, that you have to get out of the delusional state of mind and move yourself into a more positive, aligned state of mind. And that will help you to see exactly why it is that that relationship feels one-sided all of a sudden, because it may be that you have one side of your lenses actually being cleared out and now you can see it, versus before you was not able to. All right. So that's some of what I want to say. And what I wanted it to do, the whole point of me even bringing up relationships and twin flames, is the fact that I was explaining to you about a friend that I've had where there was there is this perception. This was about, like I said, it was about a few years in the making. We've actually well, I don't know if that's how I want to say it. We have literally known each other for some time. It's not like I could actually forget that the person even exists. Okay, that would never even happen. And usually, twin flame related people, you do not forget. But when it comes to twin flames, they are the hardest to accept because they're not exactly really like, first of all, we have the misinterpretation of what a twin flame is. The minute that I turn around and say that I could have met my twin flame, somebody's thinking to me like, so are you marrying that person? And now I can actually laugh about it when they actually ask me the question. Why? Because I know that I'm not marrying this person. First of all, I accept that I would not be marrying this person. And thirdly, until the twin actually realizes what had happened and that person gets aligned with that particular situation, they're going to have to do some growth before I can actually even accept anything with that, because it would never be the same the way that it was. See, and this is where this person's actually stuck at, because he actually only has one perception, and that perception is what he was left with. Ooh, you're nasty. No, I'm kidding. Well, I mean, it's kind of like that. Like, well, this. Well, here's the problem. If you're stuck with that perception, and then you have all these other lessons that happen, because believe me, I'm pretty sure that there was way more that happened. I mean, I could tell through the circle of the different spiritual interactions that this person went through a whole lot more hell than what had transpired in that year. Not to even mention probably just a year after that. But the point that I'm getting at is that people go through things, and sometimes it's actually not anything to do with you. And you would end up with the last straw that hits the camel's back. That will sometimes happen, and you have to accept that. The problem is where it's hard to accept it is when you feel like you are going to be alone in the situation. Well, yeah, you're going to be alone. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You are going to be alone in the situation, no doubt. But with you being alone, you should be able to align yourself with other people coming along. And when you get out of the growth phase and actually live in alignment with the people, you will see people naturally either A, coming back to you or running to you or doing something, okay? And yes, that will happen. But not only, even if you think that you did everything that you could do, you still have to wait for them to grow. You cannot dictate when they stop growing. And that would be the case in my situation. I might have grown, but that doesn't mean that this person is going to be ready to hear about my growth. As of right now, it still shows that the same actions will continue to happen. I will get blocked. I would be like, there would not be any conversation. It would just be empty silence. And it will continue to be that way while we're faking happiness and at the same time growing and learning. And that's kind of what it would be. So you can't force the issue. You have to just let it be. And then wait for that other person to grow. You never know. You might have thought that you have grown, and yet it may be just that last thing that you needed to fix that could have broke the straw on that camel's back, and you would have never had that friend back in your life again. So maybe God knows when the time is. Actually, it's not that maybe God does. God knows when the right time is for you to have a real relationship with the real people in your life, and who belongs and who doesn't. Think about this, okay? You're in school with all these students, right? You all have the text, but you're not going to sit there and talk to each other, right? Unless you want a big fat zero, then then you will talk to each other, and the teacher is going to think that you're cheating. Well, what do you think is going to happen if you're trying to force your way back into someone's life, or trying to reach to somebody that you really think would actually involve themselves with you, and then God is saying, no, not right now? Could it be that there's something else that God needs you to learn or to do before you can get that award? You wanting the A, but you don't have anything on paper to show that you want the A. You want the A, but what do you want the professor to do? Just put in there, okay, congratulations, you got an A on a test. So you thought you could just skip out on? You cannot do that. God's not just going to give you an A just because you think that you're going to skip out. See, that's the same way with college. And then here's the consequence. If you skip too many tests, you end up needing to retake the course, because the test is to determine what you actually learn. So you have, here we go again. Okay, if I shut off this time, it will be for good. Okay, and then we'll just have to try again tomorrow, because I'm seeing me freezing up and stuff again. But in any case, the reason that I feel as if that certain things are not happening is that we take the perspective of the college and take a test and all that. If you take the test, okay, then what you are learning is going to determine your score, okay? And what you haven't learned, and here's the spiritual reality, what you have not learned, God is going to find another way for you to learn. And if you have to keep taking the same test because you keep failing it, it's only going to get harder. Think about college tests. I don't think they get easier. They don't get easier when you keep failing them. Some people think they do, but they don't. It's the same way with life. You need to take the test and learn the test that way and pass it. Because if it gets harder and harder and harder, it's going to get to the point that you're going to have to figure out whether or not this is going to be a debt that's going to be connected to your spiritual walk. And a debt is usually a test that lingers for a lifetime. It doesn't matter how you actually do it. You could think that you've learned everything. You may, and for some of you that I do coach with, actually, I tell you straight up that this is, some of you actually have karmic debt. It does happen. And karmic debt is something to not play around with, but you need to be prepared when that test does come up, because it's going to help you dive into what the rest of your life is going to be. I mean, that's the best way that I could put it. I feel that sometimes we are trying to force people into our lives. Now, here's another reality that I'm about to share with you right now. If you're the type of person that wants somebody in your life, and the minute that something happens, you want to go and blame the other person with an agenda for something to be given to you, then right then and there, if the other person doesn't see it, you are already in a karmic relationship. Now that is a whole nother level. A karmic relationship is one that technically you don't want to be involved with, but you're not prepared to see that it happened. Now, for some of you, that actually becomes a lightful lesson. What does that mean? That basically means that no matter how many karmic relationships you go through, that is what you may have in your life, so that you can share with others that need lessons. Your debt is to show others not to do what you are doing. And therefore, they're going to show you that they're not interested and then move on at some point. So that's the relationship part of things. Then you got the business side of things. Excuse me. Down the wrong page again. Okay. In the business side of things, it's very simple, but it's like very mind-boggling, especially when you become desperate about doing business. It's one thing if you're just trying different things. In my life, that's what I was doing. I was trying different things. And it just came back as I love music, I love acting, I love the performing arts and I like the business side of things as well. So arts administration is what I've actually settled in on. Okay, well, that part makes sense. Okay, so I settled in. Do you know that it took me 5 degrees in the associate degree level to determine that, because the last one was business, that before I realized that business is the avenue and the arts is my backup plan. Although I always wanted it to be arts being the thing. But the reality has shown me that business is the thing. The backup plan was that. Well, that's why it looked like I wanted to be an actor 1 minute, a weatherman the next, and then this and that and the other thing, because I was studying all these avenues with the idea of, oh, I could do this, I could do that, I could blah, 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 right? But at the end of the day, I realized where my strength was because school has shown me that. By the time I got to my master's degree, I had to better know that. Because otherwise you were just going to be wasting money and you did not want to be wasting money where it wasn't going. And believe me, you would have. So I had a strong strength, even though that there might have been, an issue, okay, where I had to understand some topics in arts administration in my bachelor level program. By the time I got done that and went into arts administration for the master's program and graduated, I was at a high distinction 4.0 president's list individual of that graduation ceremony. So God led me to the alignment of what I needed to do, and I had to figure out where I have lost myself. Now, with that, there was also challenges because understand the year 2013 is when all this went down, where it was the beginning of the spiritual ego. Now, the first part of my spiritual ego had not dealt with fear. The fear test never came in yet. It actually started with my personal relationships and determining what a professional relationship was to a personal relationship. And while I have decided that some people were more important over here than other, but I wasn't allowing them to see the reality. I just kind of pushed them to it. That's a spiritual ego test. There's a difference, and I could explain that to you as well if you want. Spiritual ego, in a short sense, is the same thing as what the ego is. It's like your pride and everything. It is you, but it's everything about you in your spirit and God and who is put first. And sometimes you fall into this desperation that it's always about you and that it has to be your agenda and all of this about blah, blah, blah. And then the next thing you know, you start to realize that it's going to end up being just you before you're done because you don't know how to realize the spiritual ego test. Well, that's the boiling point. That's what had happened in 2013. And guess who was not the best for all of it? That was the year where, because I mean, and I believe me, I look at this, all right. I see all these things. I look at people's birth dates and everything. That was the year that I had the most challenging moments with a lot of Leos, 2013. And it was actually a very strong ego transit going on. Leo was going through a terrible transit, which is still going on, but they got about 5 more years yet to that. But it caused a lot of desperation, death, and all kinds of craziness that I didn't even think. I mean, and believe me, I see these things for other signs, but I have never seen it like this for what I have saw with this, and it usually is family and or friendship related. Well, long story short, because this what I'm talking about tonight isn't really supposed to be spiritual, but I'm guessing I'm going to stay on this topic for a minute. The spiritual ego, my thing was I was forcing my desperation on a misaligned person going through a transit at a particular time that was actually going to be even worse than if he would have just disappeared then. Because believe me when I say that, there were some people in my life that was going through a lot. Then it went and it started channeling down to Virgo, to the point where Virgo was dealing with spiritual ego issue. So I think it was about 3 years after that. And you would actually see the concept of accidents. This is what I was seeing, like accidents and like just disconfigured personalities and everything else. So in fact, they're mirrored personality, which would be right next to who they are, which is Leo, actually had disintegrated from them. In other words, it was almost as if everybody had disappeared and they were forced to have to walk out the door, move into a whole nother area, and then reevaluate their whole life. That's basically what a Virgo transit did. And this was about 2016-ish, and this is still going on. This is going to be going on for nearly 10 more years, but toward the end, the worst hasn't even happened in there. It's because when Chiron actually translates, slows down or retrogrades in Jupiter and all that, then they're going to literally have to start over, and there's going to be a lot of things that could possibly happen in a perspective of a Virgo life. But right now, it's things that had happened where either there was health issues or some kind of or it could have even been the situation where something major had happened in their life or whatever the case is. But in any case, these were all signs of what the spiritual ego test is, even though that I'm talking more on a level of astrological at this point. Okay, they are basically learning their spiritual ego points of view, and therefore sometimes if they cannot be left alone, that's one thing, but 9 times out of 10, you kind of have to do whatever you were told to do and then keep it moving. Do not get stuck around the drama of these types of people that are going through spiritual ego tests. Now, with that being said, do you have to go through spiritual ego tests for the whole time just because of a transit? Not necessarily. But the spiritual ego is usually the climax. What happens is God forces you to have to stop. So if you are, let's say you're developing a health problem, all right? Let's just say that you're developing a health problem, all right? And I'm telling you that you're a Virgo that is going through a 15-year transit right now, and you have a spiritual ego test that is coming up. And there's some things that I can actually see, but it's person to person. Well, I'm just going to use this as an example. Right now is your time to prepare yourself for the break so that so that God does not force the break on you, because for Virgo, it's really about desolation, meaning it's going to stop. And if you're not prepared for it, you could be losing everything. At the end of this, I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. This is not fake or pretend here. This is actually what this actually looks like. We're talking about a retrograde of Chiron with Juno being squared off with Jupiter, which is the planet of good luck. Okay, if you want to say it that way. I'm trying to explain a lot of stuff in a few minutes, really quick. But the issue with this is that with all of this going on, there are also your specific things that are happening. And you have to know how to live in the transits, as well as knowing what the difference is between a text and karma and whatever, however you want to believe. Bottom line, you're either going to come out of it better than you was, or it's going to end up being very desolate. And that's not what I want to see for some of you especially. Okay, this is a big, big thing. And right now I'm looking at two signs like Leo is involved in this scenario, has been this way since 2013. Some of them are starting to understand certain levels of, the first part is that they have actually become more spiritual heightened. The problem is that where Leo is messing up when it comes to the spiritual ego is that they might be spiritually heightened, but they feel as if their perception is the only perception, and therefore it's almost like the my way or the highway concept. If it's not like how I think it is, then it's not right. And that's going to be the part that you're going to learn, because if your business is related to spirituality, you might find out that will be a business that God could take away from you, because now you ended up with a karmic debt that you're not going to be able to share with others, because it's not something in reality that you have learned, not without pretending like you have learned it. Okay, so the only way you could fit into the process is actually by realizing, living it, and actually doing the work to survive these lessons, these tests that God is providing for us. And then as we are doing that, we will realize that space is not empty. It is just a perception. We just are pretending. We think that space is empty. No. What's empty is what you could not see that God has provided. Again, it goes back to outer space. We all know that the moon, the sun, the stars, and the planets all show up. We know that. So, as far as I could see, space is way more busier than what we think. So, what we need to understand is, what does God have for us specifically to do? And do not worry about other people's space, because you're not going to see that. If you're saying that space is empty, then you obviously are not going to see the space of another person. So just forget it and worry about your space. You see where I'm getting? That's what I want you guys to concentrate on. Now, I've only given you some examples of 2 zodiac signs, but there are a lot of transits that are due, actually. The good news about 2021, if you really want to know, if you want me to throw a little bit of this in there for you, I will. And that is that it is a jubilee year for those who are able to get past the breakthrough, actually break through the barrier of the pandemic. But let me explain to you the reality of what's going on, because it is a true reality what is happening here, okay? First of all, the pandemic exists. So stop arguing about masks and protect yourself. Because I'm going to tell you this right now, and I'm going to be point blank with this. If you think that you're going to overpower what God has, then this may be your last message, because I'm going to tell you like it is, as of right now. God knows the pandemic exists, and therefore we cannot be stupid and act like it doesn't. So if you don't want to protect yourself, you're going to fall into the category of being unprotected, and then God will deal with you at that point. There is no other explanation to this. I don't care if you think in this or this. The whole point, here's the problem. The whole point of the pandemic is actually relevant to a prophecy, a modern day prophecy, if you will. What God wants is for us to basically stop and reconfigure and see what is happening, while at the same time, he is using the tools of Lucifer to basically utilize and actually bring home his people. He is sealing the hearts. In the meantime, we have government entities, we got people. So this should not be politicized whatsoever. If you're that desperate to hold on to a job, then you're going to be just as desperate to hold on to that mask. Because hearing me out, this is the projection that God is asking us to do. And that is to live in the now and to follow the course of our aligned selves. Some of us actually did not even realize, even though that we might have been singer, said that was what God asked us to do. There's a lot of people changing. Even the industry itself is changing. Some of us are so confused, or they're trying to preach, don't reinvent the wheel. Excuse me? It ain't about reinventing, it's about inventing. Why? Because you are the creative visionary CEO. And if you're not a real creative visionary, then it's going to fall through. There is no breakthrough on something that has a stumbling block in front of you. You have to get over the hump. Are you hearing me? Now we are preaching. This is what it is about. It is not political. Stop pointing fingers at who is what and this is that and this and that. It is about you. I'm talking about me and you. I'm not talking about, I don't care about, whether it's Republican or Democrat or whatever. I'm talking about the reality, me and you. And if you cannot get it right and you're just sitting there worrying about a maps, then we got some issues. We do. We got some major issues. All right. Now, we always hear the term, we're going to slow it down. We're going to slow it down now. Okay, here we go. We always hear this term like, I'm not the problem, I'm the solution, right? When are we going to realize what the solution to the problem of the pandemic will be? When will we realize that? Will it be when we stop trying to predict our own predictions and realize that God is in control? Will it be then? Will it be, let me see, would it be when I took the mask off my face and then I wondered why I had it? Now, for some of you, you're probably like, oh, well, I got the antibodies, it doesn't matter. Okay, that may actually be true. But do not play around with the fact that we are also under spiritual ego tests out here too. This is an open test book, folks. We are all in this together. It doesn't matter if you got antibodies, if you got the vaccine, or any of that. And why am I saying that? Because no matter what the vaccines are doing, there are so many other dominants that are going on out there. It's kind of like the minute that the scientists are finding something else, there's something else being created. Now, more on a prophecy note, we're already starting to see the results of other scenarios, such as, like, say, blood clots and things like that. Okay, well, it's already been brought to my attention and vision about blood clots. Now, I don't know if that is based off of this, or if this is actually going to be the new reality that's going to come up, because the thing is that while it's a deadly disease, COVID, at the same time, some of us are acting in desperation and not actually taking in what the real solution to the problem is. And it doesn't matter if it's a mask or not. Like I said, I'm not talking about the thing about masks and all this. And this is not a political thing. If this continues to be a political thing, then I almost could certainly tell you that it's going to be the biggest major mistake that has ever been done on the face of the earth. I don't know how it's going to play out. I only give what I'm being told, or how the Spirit relies the message to go. And that's it. The real question is how it's being interpreted. Now, I'm trying, again, I'm one of those that is probably like like a Isaiah of the modern day, where it's like grilling it to you, like type of scenario, because it is true. I don't sure I and this is even why, even sometimes, even in my church family, sometimes they have a hard time understanding me. It's because of the fact being that I don't sugarcoat things. Here's the message. This is what it is. Boom. So the only thing is that I'm not a soothsayer either. So I'm not going to sit here and say, okay, abracadabra, or work up some kind of magic, or whatever it is that the world wants me to do, and be like, oh, poof, oh, guess what? I think I found the antidote. I can't do that either. And unfortunately, I hate to say that, that's not even a reality. We're not even close. We are not even close. So, I mean, I think the problem is that we getting a little too scared. Yes. So let me down this a bit. All right. Because this isn't about scaring people. But the thing is that the last day events are going to be quite strange. And they could come at any moment. You don't know that. And the one thing that I could tell you about predictions on the earth versus how God's predictions were is that if there is actually a boom in the economy, 9 times out of 10, and we've seen this in history, we are expecting the next crash, right? The so-called crash. We'll put that in there, because some people don't even know what a crash is. Well, see, the Bible actually predicts a crash. It's not the one that we're thinking that it is. It's not the one where Bitcoin drops down a couple $1,000s and, oh my goodness, I lost a few million. No, I'm not talking about that one. I'm talking about Babylon. I'm talking about Babylon. Babylon is falling. What are we going to do when that day comes? See, here's the harsh reality that I want to bring to your attention. And that is that God's final, now I have to be very frantic in this area and careful. Probably God's final warning to us would be using this pandemic to prepare us, because the goal is not about how the government is going to run businesses, because understand that the Bible says that God has the power to bring up nations and them down. And that has been a reality for many, many years. We can sit here all night and talk about it. All right. There are nations that are trying to remake nations. There are some of us are trying to recreate the nations that God says it will never happen. Trying to control people that don't want controlling. All this stuff going on. Do you hear me? I mean, come on now, hallelujah. If you don't hear me, then you're gonna hear it soon. I don't know how soon though, but soon. Here's the thing. I feel that the pandemic, because again, like you know what? Something just came to me. Thank you, Lord Jesus. You are right. You are so right. I gotta bring this joke up. It's in Exodus, actually. You know this joke. I'm sure you do. Where Moses was leading the people out of Egypt, freeing them from being the slaves, right? Okay, well, that's the scene. Okay, but what really went on is that Pharaoh has decided that he was going to mimic God's way of punishment by saying, oh, well, I could turn the water into blood too. Oh, look at that. So now I don't know if it was actually turned into blood or not. I believe that he might have put some dye in there and it looked like blood. There was a difference, but you know, turning into blood and looking like blood are two different things. But you know, the human eye looks at it like, well, if he could do that, well, maybe he did that, you know. But the thing that you can't bring back is, and this is kind of why I said it's ironic that it's a joke, because I'm in tears about this. The thing that you can't bring back is death. You can mimic everything, but you can't mimic death. And it was in a very precise order. It was the first son, and it had to hit Pharaoh before Pharaoh said, okay, your God, get these people away from me. Your God is dangerous, or whatever was going on. That, folks, if I put this in the same perspective, this is the same thing that I was hearing for the past year. Oh, this is once in a lifetime, every 100 years we get this. And then they're like, don't worry about it. You know, the vaccines have always done this before. You know, this and that and the other thing. But here's the problem. I hadn't yet. Now, again, I'm a little bit lazy in my research, so I had to research it. I hadn't yet seen where a vaccine had caused anybody to have blood clots. I've never heard of it. I have never heard of vaccines killing as many, well, killing as many as those who would have probably just gotten sick from the COVID as they did if they were allergic to a vaccine. In fact, I don't think I've ever, I mean, no, actually, no, now I could be lying for a minute there. I think that there was previous issues with vaccines in the past, like with flus and all that. But we started getting used to the fact, okay, every year we're going to get a flu shot, right? Well, now it's like every 6 months to a year, you're going to have to get a COVID. Really? You know, we're down to this scenario. But then in the meantime, cases are still going up, and it's causing some issues and some concerns, because if they got so many vaccines being distributed and people are being vaccinated, but the cases are not coming down, we got a problem. Now, that part I've never seen. That part I've never seen. So sometimes I actually wonder, and I'm pretty sure some of you are probably, you know, agreeing with me about some of the stuff that I'm saying here. I know that it's hard. Believe me, I'm not going to say this. I'm living on the same earth that some of you are, that we are all living in. We're all living in the same situation. But the thing is that we really have to focus on ourselves. We have to focus on loving each other, caring for each other, making sure that communities are together. War should not even be an option. It shouldn't even be like, okay, I'll think about it. Let's let them come back home in September. It shouldn't be any of this stuff. It should. War, period, should not be an option. It should be about the healing. It should be about taking care of the community. Like, for example, if America is going to take care of America, then it needs to prepare itself for the next go around, because I'm going to tell you right now, if we are caught off guard again, it's going to be to the point, because right now, the big judgment on the White House, yes, that is correct. The big judgment on a spiritual level to the White House is actually about ego and greed. And until they could get that thing straightened out, unfortunately, this whole test for all of us is actually going to be convincingly on and on. So there's going to have to be, there are not going to have to be, but and some of them are actually following along in a correct way. There are those who are on one side of the fence about talking about the thing is when you are talking about communities, helping the people and communities, we're not even talking about businesses here, okay? We're talking about people and community sharing alike. When you start seeing that kind of an attitude, but the thing is, let me tell you a little story about Nicodemus. See, he was a really bad guy. He used to cheat people on their taxes too. Oh yeah, if you hadn't never heard that story before, well, you're about to hear one. Nicodemus had cheated his way through, but you know, here's the good news. When Nicodemus actually realized what he was doing and that it actually made better sense, he didn't just wipe away the tax debt, he gave tenfold back to the people, even if it meant that it left him with nothing. He was probably one of the best of the Jews at that time that could literally be written in history. When you're talking about a tax collector, that would be one right there. So if we were to introduce that story in today's findings, what that would actually have to mean is that not only are they forgiving debt, but that they would be giving themselves up so much that it would not matter if they lost who they were to take care of the people of America. And that is the test, unfortunately, in that the angels of God know, and that God himself is seeing happening on America today. It's a harsh reality, but it is something that's happening. And it does trickle on up, because it's not even just it's not just a thing about politicians here. We're talking about big corporations too. There you might see people, important people, not even surviving the fact because their greed has gotten more important than their actual life. So you don't know what's going to happen. All I have to say is pay attention to the news. I'm not here to predict that so-and-so is going to do this, so-and-so is going to do that. And again, this is not a political party type of scenario. I'm just telling you that there is a test, and it is dealing with many people in Washington, okay? But it also does trickle up to CEOs as well. So, and the big test is actually about community and people versus their own pride, guilt, and greed. It's basically, that's where we're at right now in this case. Now, the question that I would probably get is, how do you see this kind of a thing? How do you know that? I guess it's basically the short question. And how you can know that, because you can know that, even they can know that. It is the fact of actually seeing what is happening and who is following suit. You have to see where a lot of these negatives were coming from and where a lot of the positives were coming from. There's no judgment here. The judgment is already going to be carried on by God, because if Babylon falls, you will know. Okay, I don't know when that could be. I'm not here to predict that. God had not told me that. But how I know that there's this lesson is because there's been a lot of negatives going on based off of this lesson. The first thing you need to know is what is greed. Then you need to know what is pride. Then you need to know what is ego. Ego is boasting, right? Well, I this, I that. I'm going to conquer this. I'm going to do that, right? All this, like, I don't know what you want to call it. And then it turns out to be, I'm not. And well, then now you're being played with an ego trip, because now God basically puts you out of office. I don't know how to explain it. Sometimes it happens. Now, am I saying that it's any better with other people in place of the other person? No, I'm not saying that either. But this is the lesson that has happened. If things could have been different, I could almost tell you. But there's been a lot of mockery. There has been a lot of different things going on. And God is basically just saying, I'm going to clean house. So there are people that will be retired. There will be people that probably not even make it to the retirement. We don't know. We don't know. What I do know is that we have to just make sure for ourselves that we are actually able to live our life the way that God wants us to do, or source, however you believe, okay? And understand that we have a control on what we do, okay, you and I. But technically, we have never had the control of controlling other people. And that's what tomorrow's subject matter is going to be. Out of control. We're going to be talking about out of control, because the problem is that some of us do tend to get out of control. It's another pun on words, just like empty space. But I like to touch on the subject out of control, because it's more of the modernized prophecy thing that I have to bring to your attention that I think is very important. And this even goes even as far as churches. Oh, yeah. Because the thing is that sometimes we are focused on judging who is doing what. The real question is the tabernacle doing what God asks? Is that 10% from the tabernacle going to the community to help those that actually need it? Or are we just talking about 10% to make the church bigger? That's one little question. And then the other questions that revolve is politicizing the church. Is a church becoming more of you're more toward the left and you're more toward the right? What do you do to fix that problem? Okay. But out of control really determines on who is in control to that God has aligned. And we'll use the church as an example right now, but I'm going to talk more about it tomorrow. And that would be if the pastor is actually able to synchronize with the actual board and what its capabilities are and what is happening. If they are too much complaining about, even at the pulpit, that there's too much left and right going on, then what you're doing is you're addressing your problem with no resolution. That's the reality. And you need to sit down and have a prayer and a honest to goodness subject matter prayer with God to figure out how to have the church in agreement based off of God's purpose, since we're actually talking about a church here. Then rather God's purpose rather than what you think the purpose may actually be. And then that will also trickle down to those of you that are business owners. And then you guys that are in the community. So how I look at it is economics is trickle up effects, but to be honest, our time consumption and our resource consumption should be trickled down effect, meaning that the CEO has a purpose and it must do something. Otherwise, you're not a true visionary CEO. You could say that you are, and all you're doing is just taking money, but there's really nothing happening with that. The reality is that while money might pay for things, money is not everything, because money doesn't get you your ultimate reward. Money does not actually get you into heaven. Money does not buy your love or your happiness. In fact, studies have shown many times that poorer people seem to have more respectful relationships because of the less money problems that they have. They actually know how to negotiate on real necessities rather than just having too much money that they don't know what to do with it and they're still not happy. So that's where we're at. I'm just giving you all the truths, the best that I possibly can. Now you can go ahead and you can do what you want to do about it. But the truth is that God is actually in control. He is the visionary creative artist on this earth. And therefore, we just follow, we could follow those rules. And there are examples, nice stories that you could read within the scriptures that explain where God actually had to take control versus where we knew how to focus, like Nicodemus, and God did not have to step in. And that's where we're at. And some of us, again, like I said, some of us would rather just take the easy way and just mimic the situation and say, oh, this, and this. I mean, believe me, this pandemic, if it has not taught you to love and to respect, it has taught you to divide, because then there was all this stuff about one party believes this way, another party believes that way. Well, I'm the party with Jesus Christ. And that's the way that is going to work. And that's the way that I handle it. All right, and I thank you all for tonight. Again, like I said, this all fit into the subject matter empty space. Why? Because the empty space, we are the ones that is emptying space. It's our perception. We actually think that space is empty. And here's the reason why. I'll tell you why. Because outside of Mars or what have you, even if you are in space, you cannot defy gravity. So at the same point, you are trying, we are, you, I say you, but we as a whole are actually trying to figure out what is in space. And if we cannot figure it out, then it's not something that is suitable. Just like, for example, Pluto is all of a sudden not a planet. It's a rock. It's easier just to call it that, because if we can't get out there to figure it out, then what's the sense of wasting time and money on figuring out what Pluto really is, right? Well, to be very honest, if it was like, what would Jesus do? Jesus would say, well, what does it matter? Are you planning on living on Pluto? Now, on the day that we go to heaven, I can almost guarantee you, if you want to know that Pluto is a planet, you may be able to travel there. But you gotta wait until you get the award before you could actually determine that that's what's gonna happen. So really the best thing to do, and this was yesterday's topic, is if you don't know anything about that subject matter, then it's best to keep your mouth shut instead of trying to say something that may not even be true after all still. Because there are people out there still arguing that Pluto is a planet versus not a planet. And it's, to be honest, it's actually kind of interesting and hilarious. But for a moment there, we were actually paying billions of dollars to quote unquote look at a rock. And we actually didn't really look at it. But because we couldn't figure it out. Okay, it's just a rock or whatever. You know. It's kind of like how do I want to say this? Like I'm flying in the midst of the air. And yeah. Anyway, I think that I am good tonight. If you have any other questions about the content from tonight, because I know I touched on a lot of things and a lot of spiritual topics. Definitely put your comments or questions in the comment section down below, and I'll be glad to answer them later. All right. Until then, have a very blessed evening.